Welcome to the latest compilation video of The Chosen Few. More stupid criminals doing more stupid things more stupidly. If that's your kind of thing, welcome to the party. Sit back, grab your beverage of choice, and enjoy. There aren't many immutable rules to human existence. The only two I'm aware of, death and taxes, have been around almost since the dawn of time. I would, however, like to propose a third. Stupid people do stupid things, and they do them stupidly. Which brings us to today's contestant on The Chosen Few. Meet James Blankenship. In the early months of 2013, Jimmy and his mother had a disagreement. It was apparently bad enough that Jimmy's mother banned him from her home and property altogether. Now, I've argued with my mother on occasion, but I can't recall a time she ever banned me from her house. Granted, my mother isn't his mother, but if she's anything at all like mine, it had to be something relatively serious to catch a total ban. Flash forward to June of 2013. Jimmy and his mother still had not mended fences when she caught her son breaking into her house through a first-floor window. He hadn't been permitted in the house for at least 3 months, and according to news reports at the time, he had no possessions there to retrieve. In other words, he had no legitimate reason to be there. Upon his discovery, James beat a hasty retreat, running away through adjoining backyards. A neighbor happened to notice him and alerted police, who arrived a few minutes later and began a search for whomever the neighbor had seen. Jimmy was soon discovered hiding in a crawlspace under a nearby home and was arrested. You might be wondering how the neighbor saw him so clearly. After all, burglars are rarely seen, but if they are, they're not often recognized as such, except when they decide to make their getaway through someone's yard. Jimmy decided to break into his mother's house during the day, but not because most burglaries occur during daylight hours, statistically speaking. After he was caught, arrested, and initially charged with attempted burglary and breaking and entering, this smooth brain was dumbfounded because he actually believed a person could only be charged with burglary if the crime occurred at night. I'm not gonna lie, Jimmy seems special. When all was said and done, James Blankenship pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of breaking and entering against a homeowner's will, which was a charge I didn't even know existed, and was sentenced to 180 days in prison, with 120 days of that 180 suspended, and fined $100. I could find no information on whether or not he and his mother repaired their relationship, but that's okay, because Jimmy has a new home among the chosen few. It's January 2016, El Dorado County, California. A California Department of Fish and Wildlife officer spotted a swerving vehicle occupied by two men and attempted to initiate a traffic stop. It did not go well. After a brief chase, the two men abandoned their vehicle and ran off into the frozen wilderness. They clambered down into a snow-filled canyon off of Route 50, then crossed the ice-cold American River to escape the officers pursuing them, which now included several El Dorado County deputies and some California Highway Patrol officers. After a few hours of wandering the frozen landscape, the pair came across a Forest Service officer. Although the officer wasn't close enough to effect an arrest, he managed to shout a warning to the men that they should surrender because they were in definite danger of freezing to death. His warning fell on deaf ears, however, as the fugitives ran off again. At this point, you might be wondering why the two men were so desperate to get away that they would risk freezing to death. Well, Triston Crossland was a parolee, and his companion, Derrick Dionno, had 4 active arrest warrants. And to top it all off, the vehicle they were driving contained several unlicensed pharmaceuticals, as well as at least 1 firearm. An ex-con and a wanted man possessing all of that would be assured of lengthy prison terms, hence the escape attempt. Later that night, just before 9 p.m., a 911 operator received a call from Crossland, who told the operator that the two men were now actually worried about freezing to death and began pleading for a rescue. The El Dorado County Sheriff's Office sent elements of the SWAT team, dive team, and search and rescue teams out to find the fugitives, eventually locating them a little over 12 hours later, suffering from hypothermia and frostbite. The pair were treated at a local hospital before they were turned over to the Department of Wildlife to face several charges, including evading a peace officer, felons in possession of a firearm, obstruction, and several drug charges. One officer later said he'd never come across two men who were so happy to get into a warm, dry jail cell. The irony of Crossland and Dionno pleading to be rescued by the same law enforcement they ran into the frozen wilderness to escape is not lost on me, and that irony is what makes them part of the chosen few. I'm a big believer in the power of love. After all, I met my wife of nearly 18 years literally by accident, which is kind of a funny story in and of itself, one that I might someday tell, although it does lack a criminal element to it. This, however, is not that kind of story. It's a Sunday night, September 2009, Columbus, Ohio's North Side. Diana Martinez and a companion were sitting and talking in a car outside of Diana's apartment building when 3 men approached them. Stephon Bennett and 2 unnamed accomplices then attempted to rob the 2 women, at one point even pointing a firearm at Diana's head. According to a news report from shortly after the robbery attempt, Diana opened the car door and began screaming, which caused the men to abandon the attempt and run away. One important thing to note is that the thieves were confident enough to not cover their faces, or at least Mr. Bennett didn't. Perhaps a bit too confident, much to Bennett's eventual chagrin. Less than 2 hours later, Ms. Martinez exited her apartment to find Stephon Bennett had returned, alone. He wasn't there to rob her this time, however, but his reason for returning to the scene of the crime will blow your mind. In what might just be the ultimate smooth-brained decision of all time, he was there to ask Ms. Martinez out on a date, and no, that was not a joke. Diana kept Bennett talking while her cousin called the police, who arrived shortly thereafter to take Bennett into custody. I have no idea what was going through his mind to return to the scene of the crime to ask for a date with the woman he just attempted to rob. But whatever they were, those thoughts are what made Stephon Bennett one of the chosen few. On September 10, 2022, the Chapman Highway Walmart in Knoxville, Tennessee was hit by a shoplifter. That's not outside the norm, I admit. Even though I no longer catch shoplifters for a living, I managed to see someone shoplifting almost every time I ventured to any retail store. Walmart stores, on the whole, are hit pretty hard on an almost daily basis, but the thief in this case managed to steal a karaoke machine, some camping equipment, and 3 televisions. Whether it was all taken in one trip, I don't know, but it was certainly quite the haul regardless. Again, none of that is all that unusual. When police responded to the store, they couldn't believe what they found upon their arrival. This fine, upstanding gentleman, Donald Kirkland, a career criminal with at least 11 arrests between 2012 and 2022, tried to run, but he was quickly apprehended. Here's where the not-so-normal comes into play. What was most amazing, or bold, or stupid, take your pick, was that this smooth brain was actually selling his purloined prizes in the parking lot of the store he stole them from. Because that's where I would think to sell the merchandise I just stole. Kirkland was charged with theft of merchandise greater than $1,000, but less than $2,500. Selling the merchandise you just stole in the parking lot of the store from which you just stole it is one of the quickest ways to ensure your selection to the chosen few. In December 2017, a shoplifter at a Massachusetts Walmart made a failed attempt to disable an anti-theft device normally found on most expensive and commonly stolen items at most retail stores. Now, from my experience working assets protection at Target, most anti-theft devices are fairly easy to defeat and/or remove, although I won't explain further, so don't ask. The ones with the wire wrap and electronic lock, however, not so much, which is precisely the device used in this case. That said, this particular shoplifter tried a very novel way in their attempt: Play-Doh. Why Play-Doh was thought capable of foiling said device is a mystery to me, but after the failed attempt, the thief made a hasty escape from the Walmart. What the shoplifter attempted to steal wasn't specified, but it was likely something expensive enough to justify the unusual step of running the nearly perfect fingerprints that were left in the Play-Doh. A few months later, those fingerprints led to the arrest of one Dennis Jackson, a man with a lengthy criminal record and arrest warrants in at least 2 other states at the time of his arrest for this incident. Imagine the feeling of getting arrested for the crime of unlawfully removing an anti-theft device because you used a children's toy to do it, and becoming one of the chosen few in the process. On Thursday, March 24, 2016, a Central Texas woman, Chastity Hopson, was arrested by the Granite Shoals Police Department for possession of less than 1 gram of a substance I'm not allowed to name, so let's just call it an unlicensed pharmaceutical. Her arrest was not all that unusual in and of itself. People get arrested by the thousands every day for that very thing. What was unusual, however, was how she got herself arrested. See, the Tuesday before her arrest, the Granite Shoals PD made a tongue-in-cheek Facebook post, which I'd love to quote, but I'm not willing to endanger my channel, so I'll just paraphrase the post here. If you have recently purchased various unlicensed pharmaceuticals in Central Texas, please take it to the local police or sheriff department so it can be screened with a special device. Do not use it until it has been properly checked for possible Ebola contamination. 2 days later, Ms. Hopson showed up at the Granite Shoals PD with her unlicensed pharmaceutical. Because of course she did. While I do applaud Ms. Hopson for her concern about a potentially lethal virus, I have to question her wisdom for thinking that taking her unlicensed pharmaceuticals to the police station for testing wouldn't get her arrested. By doing so, however, she definitively claimed her spot in the chosen few. For the record, I am acutely aware that some people will think this is entrapment, but it isn't even close. At no point did the police entice her to break the law. They merely provided her with a novel way to show them that she did.